Right now, as you're watching this video, there's a good chance your mind is somewhere else. Maybe you're worried about something that happened yesterday, or anxious about something that might happen tomorrow. Maybe there's a tightness in your chest, a restlessness in your body, a voice in your head telling you that something's wrong, that you need to fix something, that you're not safe. What if I told you that 2,500 years ago, a man sitting under a tree discovered something so profound about the nature of anxiety that it has the power to dissolve it in seconds, not through medication, not through years of therapy, not through positive thinking or affirmations, but through a single insight that changes everything. This isn't about becoming calm. It's about understanding something so fundamental about reality that anxiety literally has nowhere left to stand. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn might be the most important thing you hear all year. Let me start with a story. There's an ancient Buddhist parable about a man who was shot with a poisoned arrow. His friends rush to help him, but instead of letting them remove the arrow, the man starts asking questions. Who shot this arrow? What family were they from? What kind of wood is this arrow made of? What type of poison was used? His friends are begging him to let them pull out the arrow, but he keeps asking more questions. Were they tall or short? What was their intention? Where exactly did they come from? And of course, while he's asking all these questions, the poison is spreading through his body. The Buddha told this story to illustrate something crucial about human suffering, and especially about anxiety. We are that man. The arrow is our pain, our fear, our anxiety. And instead of dealing with what's actually happening right now in this moment, we're lost in endless questions, stories, and narratives about the arrow. Why do I feel this way? What does it mean? What if it gets worse? What if I can't handle it? What's wrong with me? And while we're lost in these questions, the poison of anxiety spreads. The Buddhist insight that dissolves anxiety isn't complicated, but it's so different from how we normally think that it can seem almost too simple to be true. Here it is. Anxiety only exists because we believe our thoughts about the future are real. That's it. That's the entire mechanism. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another be present or live in the now video, hear me out, because this goes much deeper than you think. The Buddha didn't just say, stop worrying about the future. He revealed something about the fundamental nature of reality that, when truly understood, makes anxiety structurally impossible. Let me explain what I mean. Right now, in this exact moment, are you okay? Not tomorrow, not in an hour, not even in 5 minutes. Right now, as you read these words or hear this voice, is there actually a problem? Not the story about a problem, not the memory of a problem, not the anticipation of a problem, but an actual concrete problem happening in this slice of reality we call now. For most of us, most of the time, the answer is no. We are physically safe, we are breathing, we are alive. The crisis exists entirely in our mental projection of a future that doesn't exist yet. This is where Buddhism gets radical. The Buddha taught something called anatta, which is usually translated as non-self, but it means something much more interesting. He taught that the self we think we are, the me that's going to experience all these terrible future scenarios we're anxious about, doesn't actually exist as a solid, continuous thing. Think about that. We spend our entire lives defending, protecting, and worrying about something that's not even real in the way we think it is. The you that's afraid of what might happen tomorrow is a mental construct, a story, a collection of thoughts and memories and projections that we've mistaken for a solid entity. The Buddha would ask, who is it that's anxious? Really investigate this. When you feel anxiety, there's a sensation in the body, there are thoughts in the mind, but can you find an actual you that's having these experiences? Or is there just experience happening? This isn't philosophical wordplay. This is pointing to something you can verify right now. Close your eyes for a moment after this sentence and try to find the self that's anxious. You'll find thoughts about being anxious. You'll find physical sensations. You'll find mental images of future scenarios. But can you find the actual entity that all of this is supposedly happening to? The reason this question dissolves anxiety is because anxiety is fundamentally about protecting a self that will exist in the future. I'm anxious because I think something bad will happen to me. But if there's no solid, continuous me that will be there to experience that future moment, what exactly am I protecting? The whole structure of anxiety collapses. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like nihilism. If there's no self, why do anything? Why care about anything? But that's not what Buddhism teaches. The Buddha didn't say nothing exists. He said things don't exist in the way we think they do. There's still experience happening. There's still life unfolding. There's still joy and pain and love and loss. But it's all happening within awareness, not to a separate self that's viewing it from the outside. This distinction is everything. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you have a big presentation at work tomorrow and you're feeling anxious about it. The normal way we experience this is, I'm anxious about the presentation. What if I mess up? What if people judge me? What if I lose my job? Notice the structure of these thoughts. There's a me that exists now, projecting into a future where another me will experience something bad. But let's break this down using Buddhist insight. Right now, in this moment, there is no presentation. The presentation exists only as a thought, a mental image of a future event. The you that's worried doesn't exist either, not as a solid thing. There's just the experience of certain physical sensations, rapid heartbeat, maybe tension in the shoulders, combined with thoughts about tomorrow. That's all that's actually happening. Not a person being anxious about a future event, just sensations and thoughts arising in awareness right now. This is what the Buddha meant by dukkha, usually translated as suffering, but more accurately meaning the unsatisfactory nature of clinging to impermanent things. We cling to our idea of how the future should be, and we cling to our idea of a self that will experience that future, and this clinging is the root of our anxiety. The incredible thing is that when you see through this mechanism, when you really understand that the future only exists as a thought happening now, and the self that's worried is also just a thought happening now, the anxiety doesn't just decrease, it literally has nowhere to stand. It's like pulling the rug out from under a ghost. There was never anything solid there to begin with. Let me share something the Buddha taught in the Bhaddekaratta Sutta, which is one of the most direct teachings on this. He said, "The past should not be followed after, the future not desired. What is past is got rid of and the future has not come. But whoever has vision now here, now there of a present thing, knowing that it is immutable, unshakable, let them cultivate it." Notice what he's saying. Don't follow after the past means don't create a story about who you were, and let that define you now. Don't desire the future means don't create anxiety by trying to control or predict what hasn't happened yet. Instead, see clearly what's actually here right now. And here's the key phrase, knowing that it is immutable, unshakable. What does that mean? It means that this present moment, exactly as it is, cannot be other than what it is. This moment is already complete. It requires nothing from you. You can't change it because it's already here. And paradoxically, this is where all our power lies, because the next moment arises from how we meet this one, not from how we worry about future ones. Think about every time you've been anxious about something. How often did the thing you were anxious about actually happen exactly as you imagined it? And on the rare occasions when something difficult did happen, how often did your anxiety actually help you deal with it? Anxiety is the mind's attempt to control the future by rehearsing for it, but it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how reality works. Reality doesn't unfold according to our mental rehearsals. It unfolds according to causes and conditions that are far too complex for our thinking mind to predict or control. This brings us to another core Buddhist teaching that's essential for understanding anxiety, impermanence, or anicca. Everything is constantly changing. Nothing stays the same for even a nanosecond. Your body is different than it was when you started reading this. Your thoughts are different. The world is different. And yet, we live as if things are solid and permanent. We think I am an anxious person, as if that's a fixed identity. We think this situation is bad and will stay bad, as if circumstances don't constantly shift. We think I have to control this outcome, as if the universe isn't already moving according to its own vast intelligence that we can barely comprehend. The Buddha taught that resistance to impermanence is the root of all suffering. We want things to stay pleasant. We want to avoid pain. We want certainty in an uncertain world. And anxiety is what happens when we try to make permanent what is inherently impermanent. We try to secure a future that doesn't exist yet, and cannot be secured. Here's where it gets really interesting. Modern neuroscience is actually confirming what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago. Research shows that anxiety doesn't actually happen in response to real danger. It happens in response to perceived danger, which is really just a thought. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. When you think about a presentation going badly, your body responds as if the presentation is happening right now and is already going badly. This is why anxiety feels so real and so physical. Your body is literally responding to your thoughts as if they are reality. But here's what the Buddha understood that neuroscience is now proving. You are not your thoughts. There's an awareness that can observe thoughts without being carried away by them. This is what meditation trains. Not the ability to stop thinking or to have only positive thoughts, but the ability to see thoughts as thoughts rather than as reality. Let me teach you a practice that embodies this understanding. It's called noting, and it's one of the most powerful anxiety-dissolving techniques in Buddhism. When you notice you're feeling anxious, instead of getting caught up in the content of the anxious thoughts, you simply note what's happening. Thinking, thinking. Worrying, worrying. Planning, planning. Imagining, imagining. You're not trying to stop these mental activities. You're just clearly seeing them for what they are. Mental events arising and passing in awareness. What this does is create a gap between the awareness and the thoughts. Normally, we are so identified with our thoughts that we think we are our thoughts. When the thought says something bad is going to happen, we believe it completely. But when you start noting, you realize, oh, that's just a thought called something bad is going to happen. It's not a fact, it's not reality, it's just a thought. And thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. The sky doesn't worry about the clouds. It just lets them pass through. This is what the Buddha called wise attention, or yoniso manasikara. It's the ability to see things as they actually are, rather than through the filter of our conditioning and fear. Unwise attention takes thoughts as reality. Wise attention sees thoughts as thoughts. Unwise attention believes I am anxious. Wise attention sees anxiety is arising. Notice the difference. I am anxious makes anxiety part of your identity, something solid and lasting. Anxiety is arising acknowledges the experience, while recognizing it as a temporary phenomenon, something that came and will go. This isn't just semantic wordplay. This shift in perspective changes your entire relationship to anxiety. You stop being someone who has an anxiety problem and become awareness within which the experience of anxiety sometimes arises. And here's what's miraculous. When you stop resisting anxiety, when you stop making it a problem, when you just let it be what it is, a temporary cluster of physical sensations and thoughts, it loses its power over you. It's like struggling in quicksand versus relaxing into it. The struggling makes you sink. The relaxing allows you to float. The Buddha taught something called the second arrow. He said pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. When something difficult happens, that's the first arrow. We can't always avoid the first arrow, but then we shoot ourselves with a second arrow by our reaction to the first. Someone criticizes us, that's the first arrow. Then we spend 3 days ruminating about it, creating elaborate stories about what it means, questioning our entire worth as a person. That's the second arrow. Anxiety is almost entirely the second arrow. Something triggers a moment of fear or uncertainty. That's the first arrow. Then we create an entire mental drama about what it means and what might happen, and that becomes chronic anxiety. That's the second arrow. The Buddhist path is about learning to not shoot yourself with the second arrow, not by suppressing your reaction, not by pretending nothing hurts, but by seeing clearly what's actually happening versus what your mind is adding to it. There's a Zen saying, first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is. This describes the journey beautifully. At first, we take everything at face value. Anxiety feels completely real and solid. That's the mountain. Then we learn about non-self and impermanence and emptiness, and we realize anxiety is just thoughts and sensations with no inherent existence. That's no mountain. But then we come full circle. There is anxiety arising, but we're no longer fooled by it. We know what it is. We know it will pass. We don't need to fight it or fix it. That's the mountain again, but now we see it clearly. This is liberation, not the absence of difficult experiences, but freedom in the midst of them. You can feel the sensations of anxiety in your body and simultaneously know that you are not anxious. You are the space in which anxiety appears. This isn't a belief system. This is direct experience available to anyone who investigates their experience clearly. Let me share something that might sound paradoxical, but is deeply true. The fastest way to dissolve anxiety is to stop trying to dissolve it. As long as you're fighting with anxiety, resisting it, trying to make it go away, you're actually feeding it. Because the resistance itself is based on the belief that anxiety is a problem, which reinforces the sense that something is wrong, which creates more anxiety. It's a feedback loop. But when you turn toward anxiety with curiosity and acceptance, when you say, okay, let's see what this actually is, something remarkable happens. You discover that anxiety is just energy moving through your body, combined with thoughts about danger. That's all it is. There's nothing wrong with energy. There's nothing wrong with thoughts. They're just natural phenomena arising within consciousness. The problem was never the anxiety itself. The problem was your relationship to it, your belief that it shouldn't be there, your fear of the fear. This is what the Buddha meant by the end of suffering. He didn't mean the end of pain or difficulty or challenge. Life includes those things. He meant the end of the extra layer of suffering we create through our resistance and our stories. The end of believing that things should be other than they are. The end of identifying with a separate self that needs to be defended and protected from a hostile universe. When you see through these illusions, anxiety doesn't grip you the same way anymore. It might still arise, the body might still have its habitual reactions, but there's no longer anyone taking it personally. There's just the flow of experience, moment by moment, and you are the awareness in which it all unfolds. I want to be clear about something. This isn't about becoming indifferent or disconnected from life. Some people hear Buddhist teachings and think it means you're supposed to not care about anything. That's a complete misunderstanding. In fact, it's the opposite. When you're not constantly caught up in anxiety about the future, you're actually more present to what's happening now. You're more available for real connection, real creativity, real love. Anxiety narrows your world down to the content of your worried thoughts. Freedom from anxiety opens you up to the vast richness of this moment, exactly as it is. There's another key Buddhist teaching that's crucial for understanding anxiety: the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 mental states that block clarity and peace. One of them is called uddhacca kukkukka, which means restlessness and worry. The Buddha taught that these hindrances aren't character flaws or things you need to eliminate. They're simply patterns of mind that arise when certain conditions are present, and they cease when those conditions are absent. This is incredibly liberating. It means you're not fundamentally broken. You're not an anxious person in some permanent way. Anxiety is just a pattern that arises based on conditions. Change the conditions, and the pattern changes. What are the conditions that give rise to anxiety? Usually it's a combination of believing your thoughts about the future, identifying with them as me, resisting what's happening now, and holding on to fixed ideas about how things should be. When you understand this, you stop thinking, how do I fix my anxiety problem, and start investigating, what am I believing right now that's creating this experience? Let me give you a direct practice you can do right now. Think about something that makes you anxious. Really let yourself feel it for a moment. Notice where you feel it in your body. Notice the thoughts that accompany it. Now ask yourself this question: what is believing this thought giving me? Not why do I have this thought, but what am I getting out of believing it? Usually we believe anxious thoughts because we think they're protecting us somehow. We think if we worry enough, we can prevent bad things from happening. We think if we rehearse the worst-case scenario, we'll be prepared. But investigate this directly. Has worry ever actually prevented something bad from happening? Or has it just made you suffer in advance for something that usually doesn't even occur? This investigation isn't about forcing yourself to stop worrying. It's about clearly seeing what worry actually does and doesn't do. When you see clearly that worry doesn't actually help, it naturally begins to release its grip on you. The Buddha also taught something called the 3 marks of existence. Impermanence, non-self, and suffering or unsatisfactoriness. We've talked about the first two, but let's look at the third more deeply. Why did the Buddha say that all conditioned phenomena are unsatisfactory? Because we keep trying to find permanent satisfaction in things that are impermanent. We think, if I can just make this future scenario not happen, then I'll be okay. But even if you successfully avoid that thing you're worried about, your mind will just find something else to worry about. Because the anxiety isn't really about the external situation, it's about the internal resistance to uncertainty. The Buddha's radical claim is that you can never make the external world certain and safe enough to stop being anxious. The only way to end anxiety is to fundamentally change your relationship to uncertainty itself. Instead of seeing uncertainty as a threat, you learn to see it as the basic nature of reality. Nothing is certain, nothing can be certain, and paradoxically, when you deeply accept this, you become unshakable. Because you're no longer banking your peace on outcomes you can't control. There's a beautiful Buddhist story about a woman named Kisa Gotami whose baby died. She was so overcome with grief and denial that she went from house to house carrying her dead child, begging for medicine to heal him. People thought she had gone mad. Finally, someone directed her to the Buddha. She came to him and begged for medicine. The Buddha said, "I can help you, but first you must bring me a handful of mustard seeds from a household that has never experienced death." Kisa Gotami was overjoyed and went from door to door asking for mustard seeds. But every house she went to, she found that someone had died. A mother, a father, a child, a grandparent. There was no household untouched by death. Finally, she understood what the Buddha was teaching her. Death and loss are part of life. Everyone experiences them. She was not uniquely cursed or suffering something that shouldn't happen. This understanding didn't erase her pain, but it ended her resistance to it. She was able to grieve fully and then let go. This is what acceptance means in Buddhism. Not resignation, not pretending everything is fine, but seeing clearly what is true and letting yourself be with it rather than fighting against it. The same principle applies to anxiety. You might think you're the only one who feels this anxious, that something is uniquely wrong with you, but anxiety is part of the human condition. Everyone experiences it to varying degrees. The Buddha isn't offering you a way to become superhuman and never feel anxiety again. He's offering you a way to see anxiety so clearly that it no longer controls you. There's a practice in Buddhism called metta, or loving kindness, that's particularly powerful for anxiety. When you're anxious, there's usually a subtle layer of self-judgment happening. I shouldn't feel this way. What's wrong with me? I should be stronger. This self-judgment is actually more painful than the anxiety itself. Metta practice involves directing phrases of goodwill toward yourself. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I be at ease. This isn't about forcing yourself to feel good. It's about softening the harsh internal environment that makes anxiety worse. When you can meet your anxiety with kindness rather than judgment, when you can say, "This is difficult right now, and it's okay that it's difficult," something shifts. The anxiety might not immediately disappear, but the suffering around the anxiety decreases dramatically. Here's something crucial that the Buddha taught. You can't think your way out of anxiety. The thinking mind is what creates anxiety in the first place by projecting into the future and creating stories about what might happen. So trying to use more thinking to solve the problem is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. This is why Buddhism emphasizes direct experience over conceptual understanding. It's not about having the right thoughts about anxiety. It's about seeing clearly what anxiety actually is when you investigate it directly in your experience. When you sit down in meditation and anxiety arises, instead of getting lost in the content of the anxious thoughts, you learn to feel the raw sensations in your body. Where is the tightness? Where is the contraction? What does it actually feel like without the story? When you do this, you often discover that the sensation itself isn't nearly as bad as the story about it. The story says, "This is terrible. This might mean something awful." The sensation is just energy, just vibration, just aliveness expressing itself in a particular way. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. The Buddha taught that we should even investigate the one who wants to be free of anxiety. Who is it that's seeking liberation? Who is it that wants to feel better? This is the deepest level of the teaching. Even the seeking for freedom can become a subtle form of anxiety if it's based on the belief that the present moment isn't enough, that you aren't enough as you are. True liberation is the realization that there's nowhere to get to, nothing to achieve. You are already the awareness within which all experience arises. Anxiety comes and goes within you, but you are not anxiety. Thoughts come and go within you, but you are not thoughts. Even the sense of self comes and goes within you. You are the unchanging awareness within which all change occurs. This isn't something you need to become. It's what you already are. The whole journey of Buddhism is about removing the veils that obscure this simple, obvious truth. When you see this clearly, even for a moment, anxiety becomes like a wave on the surface of the ocean. The wave might be turbulent, but the depths remain still. The Buddha said all that we are is the result of what we have thought. This sounds like it contradicts what I just said about not thinking your way out of anxiety, but it actually points to something deeper. The thoughts we habitually think create grooves in the mind. If we habitually think anxious thoughts, we strengthen the anxiety pattern. But if we habitually return to the present moment, if we habitually investigate our experience with clear awareness, if we habitually meet difficulty with acceptance rather than resistance, we create new grooves. We literally rewire our brain. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. Buddhists have known about it for millennia. Every time you notice you're lost in anxious thinking and gently return your attention to the present moment, you're weakening the old pattern and strengthening a new one. This is why practice is so important, not because you need to achieve some perfect state, but because you're training a new way of relating to your experience. Initially, it might feel forced or artificial, but over time it becomes your natural response. The anxiety trigger fires, and instead of getting swept away, you automatically observe, anxiety arising. That simple shift creates space, and in that space, you're free. There's one more crucial Buddhist teaching I want to share with you. The teaching on emptiness, or sunyata. This is probably the most misunderstood concept in Buddhism, but it's essential for understanding anxiety. Emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. It means that nothing exists independently, in and of itself. Everything is interdependent, arising from causes and conditions. Your anxiety isn't a solid thing that you have. It's a temporary arising of physical sensations, thoughts, and mental patterns that came together based on certain conditions. When those conditions change, the anxiety changes or disappears. This is why it's so important not to identify with your anxiety, not to make it part of your story of who you are. I am an anxious person reifies anxiety into something solid and permanent. Anxiety as arising in this moment sees the true nature of it as empty of permanent existence. This might seem like a small semantic shift, but it changes everything. One locks you into a pattern, the other gives you freedom to change. When you truly understand emptiness, you realize that you have the power to change your experience, not by forcing different circumstances, but by changing your relationship to the circumstances that arise. This is the ultimate freedom the Buddha pointed to. Not freedom from difficulty, but freedom within difficulty. Not the absence of anxiety, but the end of being controlled by anxiety. So here we are, coming back to where we started. That man with the poisoned arrow, that's us. We can keep asking why, keep analyzing, keep trying to figure out the perfect solution before we act. Or we can pull out the arrow. We can stop believing the anxious thoughts. We can stop identifying with the one who's anxious. We can see clearly what's actually happening right now in this moment. And in that seeing, anxiety collapses, not because we've solved all our problems, not because the future is now certain, but because we've seen through the fundamental illusion that created the anxiety in the first place. The illusion that there's a separate self that needs to be protected from a dangerous future that doesn't exist yet. When that illusion is seen clearly for what it is, just an illusion, just a pattern of thinking, anxiety has nowhere to stand. What remains is simply this moment, exactly as it is. And this moment right now is actually okay. Even if it contains discomfort, even if it contains challenge, right now you're here, you're breathing, you're alive. And that's enough. That's always been enough. The Buddhist truth that makes anxiety collapse isn't complicated. It's the recognition that anxiety only exists because we believe in a story about a self facing a future, and both the self and the future are concepts, not reality. Reality is only now, and now is the only place where peace can be found. Not the peace of having everything figured out, but the peace of not needing to have everything figured out. The peace of being exactly what you are, in exactly this moment, which is always already complete.